Chapter 7. Paris. Stephen de Saulles, keeper of the deepest secrets for the Central Intelligence Agency, forced his overweight body out of the driver's seat. He stood in the deserted parking lot of the small shopping center in Annapolis, Maryland, where the only source of light came from a closed gas station. De Saulles looked at his watch. It was 3:30 in the morning. The headlights of an approaching limousine shot through the darkness at the far end of the parking lot, turning toward the CIA analyst, causing him to shut his eyes. He had to make the process of his discovery of the information clear to those men. They provided the money that was the means to a life he and his wife dreamed of, education at the best universities for their 6 grandchildren, not the state colleges that came with the salary of a government worker. The new Medusa had offered money, and he had come running. 2 men got out of the limousine and approached him. "What does this Webb look like?" asked Albert Armbruster as they walked along the edge of the parking lot. "I've only got some old photographs and physical details from his army files," de Saulles said. "He's rather large, tall, I mean, and now he'll be in his late 40s or early 50s. "Can't you be more exact than that?" The other man, short and strong with dark eyebrows beneath dark hair, looked at de Saulles. "Be specific," he added. "Now, just a minute," protested the analyst. "The information I'm giving you is the best I can get, and frankly, whoever you are, I don't like the tone of your voice." "He's upset," said Armbruster. "He's an Italian from New York, and he doesn't trust anybody." "Who can you trust in New York?" asked the short, dark man, laughing. Armbruster looked at de Saulles again. "Does he have gray eyes?" he asked. "Well, yes, that was in the files." "It's Cobra," Armbruster said. "Who?" de Saulles said. "He called himself Cobra, and he knew all about us." Armbruster and the man from the Mafia climbed back into the limousine. "Where's the other car?" Armbruster asked. The Italian looked at his watch. "It's parked less than a kilometer down the road. The driver will pick up de Saulles on his way back and stay with him until the time is right." "But this Cobra, this Webb, why is he coming after us? What does he want?" "There's a connection with that Jackal character, maybe." "That doesn't make sense. We have no connection with the Jackal." "Why should you?" asked the Mafia man, grinning. "You've got us, right?" "It's a very loose association, and don't you forget it. Cobra, Webb, whoever he is, we've got to find him. With what he already knew, plus what I told him, he's dangerous." "You said Swain was dangerous. We took care of him. Do you want to discuss a price?" Armbruster turned and looked at the calm Sicilian face of his companion. "You mean a contract? On Cobra? On Webb?" "I'll close for 6 months, change the name, then start advertising in the magazines before reopening," said John Saint-Jacques to his brother-in-law. "Meanwhile, it's best to say nothing," said Bourne. "Well, we have to give some explanation. I've put out a story about a huge gas explosion, but not many people believe it. Of course, to the world outside, an earthquake down here would only get a few lines on an inside page. It'll pass. People will find something else to talk about. Meanwhile, it's time for me to leave." "Where are you going?" "Paris." "But what can Paris solve?" "I can find him. I can take him." "He's got friends over there." "I've got Jason Bourne," said David Webb. Lie for me, Johnny. Tell Marie I'm fine, and that I have information about the Jackal that only Fontaine could have provided. Which is the truth, actually. He told me about a cafe in Argenteuil called the Soldier's Heart. Call Marie in a couple of hours and bring them back here. It's the safest place they can be. The next day at 10:25 in the morning, Washington time, Dr. Maurice Panoff, accompanied by his guard, walked out of Walter Reed Hospital after seeing a patient. Panoff, thinking about the case, looked at his guard, suddenly surprised. "You're a new man, aren't you? I thought I knew all of you." "Yes, sir, we're often sent on short notice." The psychiatrist continued across the sidewalk to where his car was usually waiting for him. It was a different vehicle. "This isn't my car," he said, puzzled. "Get in," ordered his guard, politely opening the door. "What?" A pair of hands from inside the car grabbed him, and a uniformed man pulled him into the back seat as the guard followed. The one who had been inside pulled Moe's jacket off his shoulder and pushed up the short sleeve of his summer shirt. He stuck a hypodermic needle into Panoff's arm. "Good night, doctor," he said. "Call New York," he added to the guard. "Mr. Simon?" said the Frenchman, an older man with a small white beard. "That's right," replied Bourne, shaking hands in a narrow, deserted hallway in Paris's Orly airport. "I am Bernardin, Francois Bernardin, an old friend of our friend Alexander." "Alex mentioned you," said Bourne, smiling. "How is he? We hear stories, rumors, out of Beijing, Hong Kong, some concerning a man named Jason Bourne." "I've heard them." "Yes, of course, but now Paris. Alexander said you would need a place to stay. A hotel?" "Something small, but I know Montmartre. I'll find a place myself. What I will need is a car, registered under another name, preferably of a dead man." "It's been arranged. It is in the underground garage on the Capucine near the Place Vendôme." Bernardine reached into his pocket, pulled out a set of keys, and handed them to Bourne. "An older Peugeot in Section E. There are thousands of them in Paris, and the license number is on the keyring." "Thank you," said Bourne. "This is very good of you." "I must explain that I owe my life to Alexander Conklin, and that I know who you are, and most of what you have done, Jason Bourne." Bernardin again reached into a pocket and pulled out a card. "Here is my office address. I'm just a consultant now, you understand. And on the back I've written down my home phone. It is a completely secure line. Call me, and whatever you need will be provided. Remember, I am your only friend in Paris. No one else knows you are here." Bourne checked into the Pont Royal on the Rue Montalembert, then walked along the Boulevard Saint-Germain, buying the things he needed. Whatever he could buy now would save time later. Fortunately, there was no need to persuade old Bernardin to supply him with a weapon. During the drive into Paris from Orly, the Frenchman had handed a taped brown box to Bourne. Inside was an automatic with 2 boxes of bullets. Underneath were 30,000 francs, around 5,000 American dollars. "Tomorrow I will arrange a method for you to obtain money whenever necessary. Within limits, of course." "No limits," Bourne had said. "I'll have Conklin wire you 100,000. Just tell him where." "Of government money?" "No, mine. Thanks for the gun." Bourne returned to his room and glanced at his watch. It was almost 2 o'clock, Washington time, and Bernardin had told him that Conklin would be expecting a call. He picked up the phone and called the number in Vienna, Virginia. It was picked up at the first ring. "Alex, it's me. What happened? Marie?" "No," interrupted Conklin. "I spoke to her around noon. She and the kids are back at the hotel, and she's ready to kill me. She doesn't believe a word I told her, and I'm going to wipe the tape. I haven't heard that kind of language since Vietnam." "She's upset." "So am I," Conklin interrupted. "Mo's disappeared." "What?" "You heard me. Panov's gone." "My God, how? He's guarded every minute." "We're trying to find out." "But, Alex, who? Carlos was on his way back here to Paris. Whatever he wanted in Washington, he got. He found me, he found us. He didn't need any more." "Desaulles dead," said Conklin quietly. "He knew about me and Mo Panov. I threatened the agency with both of us, and Desaulles was there in the conference room." "I don't understand. What are you telling me?" "Desaulles was with Medusa. That's why he was killed, to remove our connection." "To hell with them. I'm not interested in Medusa." "They're interested in you. They want you." "I couldn't care less. I've only got one priority, and he's here." "Then I haven't been clear," said Conklin, his voice faint. "Last night I had dinner with Mo. I told him everything. Tranquility, your flight to Paris, Bernardin, everything." On a side street in Anderlecht, 5 kilometers south of Brussels, a military car with the flags of a general stopped in front of a sidewalk cafe. General James Teagarden, commander of NATO, stepped out of the car into the early afternoon sunlight. He turned and offered his hand to an attractive female major, who smiled her thanks as she climbed out after him. Teagarden led her across the wide sidewalk toward the cafe. All the tables were occupied, except one at the far end, where a small card said, "Reserved." The owner, with 2 waiters behind him, came quickly to meet his important guest. When the commander was seated, a bottle of wine was presented and the menu discussed. A relaxed hour later, Teagarden and his lady were interrupted by the general's driver, a middle-aged army sergeant whose expression showed his anxiety. The commander of NATO had received a message over his secure phone, and the driver had written it down. He handed Teagarden the note. The general stood up, his sunburned face turning pale as he glanced around the now half-empty cafe. He reached into his pocket and dropped some Belgian franc notes on the table. "Come on," he said to the woman major. "Let's go. You," he turned to his driver, "get the car started." "What is it?" asked his lunch companion. "London, over the wire. Desaulles and Armbruster are dead." "Oh my God, how?" "I don't know, but we're getting out of here. Come on." The general and his lady rushed across the wide sidewalk and into the military vehicle. The car shot forward, traveling less than 50 meters when it happened. A great explosion blew the military vehicle into the sky. Pieces of glass and metal and lines of blood filling the narrow street in Anderlecht. Later that afternoon, the waiter in the sidewalk cafe called to his boss as police, firefighters, and ambulance crews continued their bloody business in the road. "What is it?" replied the upset owner of the cafe, still shaking from the hard questioning he had gone through from the police and the journalists. "I'm ruined," he said. "We will be known as the Café of Death." "Sir, look!" The waiter pointed at the table where the general and his lady had sat. "The police have examined it," said the owner. Across the glass top of the table, in capital letters written in red lipstick, was a name: Jason Bourne. Chapter 8. The Soldier's Heart. Bourne had moved to a cheaper hotel and changed his appearance. He was wearing faded pants and an old French Army shirt. He had a day's growth of beard, and his hair and eyebrows were colored red. Out on the street, he knew he had to walk a number of blocks before he found a taxi. Taxis were not the fashion in this section of Montparnasse. Neither was the noisy crowd around a newspaper kiosk at the second corner. People were shouting, many waving their arms, holding newspapers in their fists, anger and puzzlement in their voices. He walked faster, reached the stand, threw down his coins and grabbed a newspaper. The breath went out of him as he tried to control the shock waves that swept through him. Teagarden killed. The assassin, Jason Bourne. Madness! What had happened? Was he losing what was left of his mind? He broke away from the crowd and leaned against the stone wall of a building, breathing hard. Alex. A telephone. "What happened?" he screamed into the mouthpiece to Vienna, Virginia. "Calm down," said Conklin quietly. "Where are you?" "Bernardin will pick you up and get you out. He'll make arrangements and put you on a plane to New York." "Wait a minute. The Jackal did this, didn't he?" "We've been told that it was a contract from some crazy people in Beirut. That may be true or it may not. But to answer your question, of course it was the Jackal." "So he blamed it on me. Carlos blamed it on me?" "He's smart, I'll say that for him. You come after him, and he uses a contract that keeps you there, hidden in Paris. Then we turn it around. While he thinks I'm running and hiding, I'm walking right into his nest." "You're crazy. You get out while we can still get you out." "Sorry, Alex. This is exactly where I want to be." "Well, maybe I can change your mind. I spoke to Marie a couple of hours ago. She's flying to Paris." "To find you." "She can't." "That's what I said, but she wouldn't listen. She said she knew all the places you and she used 13 years ago, that you'd use them again. She's on her way." Bourne put down the phone and walked away. Maurice Panov sat in a chair by a window, looking out over the green fields of a farm somewhere, he assumed, in Maryland. He was in a small second-floor bedroom, his bare right arm confirming what he already knew. He had been drugged repeatedly. His mind emptied. His thoughts and secrets brought chemically to the surface. The damage he had done was incalculable. He understood that, but what he did not understand was why he was still alive and being treated so well. The door opened and his guard walked in, a short, well-built man with an accent that Panov placed somewhere in the northeastern United States. Over his left arm were the psychiatrist's clothes. "Okay, Doc, you have to get dressed. I made sure everything was cleaned and pressed." The guard handed Panov his clothes. "Come on, put 'em on, Doc. We're going on a little trip." "I suppose it would be foolish to ask where?" said Panov, getting out of the chair. "Very foolish." "Valuable!" cried the mafia boss in his living room in Brooklyn Heights. "Of course, you fool. Panov has worked on the heads of some of the top people in Washington. His files must be worth the price of Detroit." "You'll never get them, Louis," said the middle-aged man in an expensive suit. "They'll be taken out of your reach." "Well, we're working on that. $5 million is still the price for this Bourne Webb character, right?" Louis DeFazio said. "With a condition." "I don't like conditions, Mr. Lawyer. I don't like 'em at all." "I don't think you'll be offended." "Go on." "There'll be $2 million extra, because we insist you include Webb's wife and his government friend Conklin." "Agreed." "Now to the rest of the business." He laid an envelope on the table. "This contains payment for Armbruster and Teagarden." "According to Panoff," interrupted the mafia boss, "they know about 2 more of you, an ambassador in London and that senior officer in Washington. You want us to take care of them?" "Possibly later, not now. They both know very little, and nothing about the financial operations. I'll let you know." Bryce Ogilvy, of the Manhattan law firm Ogilvy, Spofford, Crawford, and Cohen, rose from his seat and left the room. Morris Panoff sat in the front seat of the car with his guard, his hands loosely, almost politely, tied, and with a cloth around his eyes. They had been driving for about 30 minutes in silence when the guard spoke. "You know, Doc, I have a nephew, my sister's kid, who's a doctor too. I paid for him to go through medical school. He keeps asking me where the money came from." "That's very generous of you, but I'm surprised he hasn't said anything about your mouth." "My mouth? What the hell's wrong with my mouth?" "The yellow on your teeth and the fading pink of your gums." "So they've always been like that." "It might be nothing, but he should have spotted it. It could be serious. When did you last see a dentist?" "I don't like dentists." "You should see one. You could have problems." Silence. Then, 7 minutes later, "What kind of problems?" "Anything from infection to more serious stuff." Silence. 4 minutes later, "What's the most serious?" "Mouth cancer. If it's caught in time, it can be stopped with minor bone removal. If not, the entire jaw might have to go." Panoff could feel the car swing to one side as the driver momentarily lost control. Silence. A minute and a half later, "The whole jaw?" "It's either that or the whole of the patient's life." "You think I could have something like that?" "I'm not a dentist. I can't say for sure." "You're a doctor, aren't you? I mean, you went to medical school." "Yes." "So look at me." I can't see anything." Panoff suddenly felt the guard's thick, strong hand pulling the cloth off his head. The car was dark inside. Except for the front windows, the windows were almost black. "Go on, look." The mafia man turned his head toward Panoff, his thick lips parted and his teeth showing. "It's too dark in here," replied Mo, seeing what he wanted to see in the front window. They were on a narrow country road. Wherever he was being taken, he was being driven there by an extremely indirect route. "Open a window!" shouted the guard, his head still twisted, his eyes still on the road. Panoff lowered the window on his side, seeing nothing but trees and bushes. "There we are," he continued, raising his loosely tied hands to the mafia man's mouth. His eyes, however, not on that mouth, but on the road ahead. "Oh, my God!" he cried. "What?" screamed the guard. "Infection! It's everywhere in the upper and lower jaws. The worst sign." Oh, God! A huge tree, up ahead, on the left-hand side of the empty road. Maurice Panoff put his tied hands on the wheel, lifting his body off the seat as he pushed the wheel to the left. Then, at the last second before the car hit the tree, he threw himself to the right, curling up for protection. The crash was enormous. Broken glass and crushed metal accompanied the rising mists of steam and the growing fires underneath that would soon reach a gas tank. The guard was still breathing, not dead, his face bleeding. Panoff pulled him out of the wreck and into the grass as far as he could, just before the car exploded. Panoff released his loosely tied hands and picked the pieces of glass out of the guard's face. He then checked for broken bones, but it seemed that the man had been lucky. Panoff searched the guard's clothing, astonished at the money that was there, about $6,000, and the various driver's licenses, 5 different identities from 5 different states. He took the money and the licenses to give to Alex Conklin, but he left the wallet. There were photographs of the man's family. "Goodbye, my friend," thought Panoff as he crawled over to the road, stood up, and smoothed his clothes, trying to look as respectable as possible. He started to walk, continuing north in the direction the car had been taking. The soldier's heart was not on a boulevard or an avenue. Instead, it was in a dead-end alley around the corner from a closed factory, in what had to be the ugliest part of Argenteuil. Bourne limped through the door and made his way to the crowded bar. He bought a beer and looked around. The place was full of men who looked like soldiers or former soldiers. Fights started from time to time and were stopped by the muscular waiters. Bourne took out a piece of paper and wrote on it, "The nest of a blackbird is worth 1,000,000 francs. Object, private business advice. If interested, be at the old factory around the corner in 30 minutes. Where is the harm? An additional 5,000 francs for being there alone." Bourne folded the paper over a 100-franc note and signaled the barman. Slowly, the man moved his large body forward and leaned his thick, tattooed arms on the bar. "What is it?" he asked. "I have written a message for you," replied Bourne. "I am a man who carries wounds, but I am not a poor man." Bourne passed the paper and the banknote, then turned and headed for the door. Outside, he hurried up the broken sidewalk toward the alley's entrance. He stood still, moving only his hand to feel the hard steel and the security of his automatic. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Then the door of the cafe opened, and the barman came out. Bourne watched as he walked across the street. "I am here," said the barman, "and I am grateful. Your name?" "Santos. I believe you mentioned 5,000 francs in your note." "It's here." Bourne held out the money. "Thank you," said Santos, walking forward and accepting the bills. "Take him," he added. Suddenly, Bourne heard running footsteps behind him. Before he could reach his weapon, something heavy crashed down on his head. Chapter 9. The Blackbird. "We're alone," said the voice across the dark room as Bourne opened his eyes. The barman sat in a large armchair. Bourne felt the angry swelling on the top of his head. "There's no break, no blood. Only what I imagine is a very painful lump," said the Jackal's man. "That's accurate, especially the last part. At your side, on a table, is an ice bag. You should use it." Bourne reached down, grabbed the cold bag, and brought it to his head. "You're very kind," he said coldly. "What do you know about the Blackbird?" said the barman. "Do we do business? 1,000,000 francs worth?" "It seems to me that if a buyer mentions such an amount in the first offer, it will go higher," the Jackals man said. 1.5 million, maybe even 2. "But I'm not the buyer. I'm the middleman. I was given permission to pay 1 million. Take it or leave it. I have other options." "Do you really?" "Certainly." "Not if you're a dead body found floating in the sand without any identification." "I see." Bourne looked around the darkened flat. It was very different from the dirty cafe below. The furniture was tastefully selected, not elegant, but certainly not cheap. Mildly astonishing were the bookshelves covering the wall between the two windows. The academic in Bourne wished he could read the titles. They might give him a clearer picture of this strange, huge man whose speech might have been formed at the Sorbonne. His eyes returned to the barman. "Then I can't assume I'll leave here alive?" "No," answered the Jackal's man. "Of course, you're losing any chance of collecting 1,000,000 francs, or, as you suggested, maybe a great deal more." "Then may I suggest," said the barman, crossing his thick arms in front of him as if he were a priest, and glancing at the tattoos on his skin, "that a man who has such large available funds will not only part with them in exchange for his life, but will happily deliver the information requested to avoid unnecessary and severe pain." The Jackal's man suddenly shouted, "What do you know about a blackbird? Who told you about the soldier's heart? Where do you come from? And who are you, and who is your client?" Bourne froze, his body tense but his mind spinning, racing. He had to get out. "Obviously, I don't wish to die for a client or be hurt to protect his information, so I'll tell you what I know, which isn't much. First, the funds are not available to me personally. I meet with a man in London to whom I deliver the information, and he releases an account in Bern, Switzerland, to a name and number, any name, any number that I give him. Second, what do I know about a blackbird and the soldier's heart? I was told that an old man, I suspect he was French, approached a well-known public figure and told him he was the target of an assassination. Who believes a drunk old man? Unfortunately, the assassination took place. But, fortunately, an assistant to the victim was by his side when the old man warned him. Even more fortunate, the assistant is extremely close to my client, and the assassination was a welcome event to both. The assistant secretly passed on the old man's information. A blackbird is sent a message through a cafe known as the Soldier's Heart in Argenteuil. Who am I? My offices are hotel rooms in various cities. I am currently registered under the name of Simone at the Hotel Pont Royal, where I keep my passports and other papers. Bourne paused, his open hands outstretched. I've told you the entire truth as I know it. Not the entire truth, said the barman. Who is your client? I'll be killed if I tell you. I'll kill you now if you don't. He picked up Bourne's hunting knife. The blade shone in the light of the floor lamp. My clients are a group of powerful men in the United States. They guard their names like nuclear secrets. But I know of one, and he should be enough for you. Ooh. Find out for yourself. Find out that I'm telling you the truth, and in the process, make yourself so rich that you can do anything you want to do for the rest of your life. Where's the harm? I can be refused. My clients refuse. There's no trap. My clients don't want to see the blackbird. They want to hire him. How could this be done? How can I be satisfied? Invent a high position for yourself and reach the American ambassador in London. The name is Atkinson. Tell him you've received secret instructions from Snake Lady. Ask him if you should accept them. Snake Lady? What's that? Medusa. They call themselves Medusa. Where the hell are you? Shouted Alexander Conklin in Virginia. I don't know, Panov replied. They drugged me, Alex. I talked. We assumed that. We have to know where you are. Others are looking for you, too. A guy in a truck gave me a lift and I jumped off in the first town. But I didn't see a sign. Wait a minute, there's a drugstore across the street. The sign says, Battleford's Best. Will that help? There was a sigh on the line. Yes. If you knew anything about the Civil War, you'd know it too. Find your way to the old battleground at Ford's Bluff. There are signs everywhere. A helicopter will be there in 30 minutes, and don't say anything to anybody. Bourne walked into the Hotel Pont Royal and immediately approached the night concierge, taking out a 500-franc note and placing it quietly in the man's hand. The name is Simon, he said, smiling. I've been away. Any messages? No messages, Monsieur Simon, was the quiet reply. But 2 men are outside. One on the Montalembert, the other across on the Rue du Bac. They are watching or waiting for somebody. Bourne removed a 1,000-franc note and gave it to the man. I pay for such eyes, and I pay well. Keep watching. Of course, sir. Reaching his room, Bourne saw that everything was as he had left it. The bed. Oh, God, he needed to rest. To sleep. He couldn't do it any longer. Something was happening inside him, less energy, less breath. He wanted to lie down. No. There was Marie. There was Bernardine. He went to the telephone and dialed the number. Nothing, the old man said. She's not on any international flight currently in the air or scheduled for departure. I even checked the transfers from London, Lisbon, Stockholm, and Amsterdam. Nothing. There has to be. She wouldn't change her mind. It's not like her. And she wouldn't know how to avoid immigration. I repeat, she's not listed on any flight from any country coming into Paris. Damn. I will keep trying, my friend. According to Alex, one should never underestimate your Marie. François Bernardin woke up suddenly, frowning, disturbed. She wouldn't change her mind. The words of the husband who knew her best. She's not listed on any flight from any country coming into Paris, his own words. Paris. The important word was Paris. But suppose it was not Paris? Ridden crawled rapidly out of bed in the early morning light. He shaved, washed, dressed, and walked down into the street to his Peugeot. 58 minutes later, he swung the car into the parking lot of a small plain brick building in Orly Airport. It was a branch of the Department of Immigration, an important one known as the Office of Air Entries, where computers kept up-to-date records of every traveler flying into France at all the international airports. 19 minutes later, he had his answer, but the information was too late. Ridden found a payphone and dialed the Pont Royal. "Yes," said the voice of Jason Bourne. "It's Francois. I apologize for waking you." "I was just getting up. What's happening?" "I'm out at Orly, and I'm afraid I have bad news. Your wife flew into Marseille slightly over 2 hours ago. Not Paris, Marseille." "Why is that bad news?" cried Bourne. "We know where she is. We can—" "Oh, God, I see what you mean. She can take a train, hire a car. She can even fly up to Paris under any name she wants to use." Bourne's watch read 1 o'clock when 2 men walked out of the alley and across the street. "Santos will see you now," said one of them. "I don't see him." "You have to come with us. He does not leave the soldier's heart." "Why do I not like that?" "There is no reason for such feelings. As I said earlier, he has peace in his heart." Bourne was led down the alley, past the cafe's entrance, to a small break in the buildings. One by one, borne between the 2 men, they made their way to the back of the cafe. Bourne was led through an unexpectedly beautiful garden to a small outside elevator. It barely held the 3 of them. When the iron gate was closed, the silent messenger pressed a button in the darkness and spoke. "We are here, Santos. Camellia, bring us up." "Camellia?" asked Bourne. "He knows everything is all right," said the other man. "If not, my friend might have said Rose." "What would happen then?" "You don't want to think about it." The elevator stopped, and the quiet messenger opened a thick steel door. Bourne was led into the familiar room with its tasteful, expensive furniture. "You may leave, my friends," said Santos from an armchair. The 2 messengers, instead of heading for the back of the room and the elevator, opened a door in the left wall and disappeared. "Sit down, Mr. Simon," said Santos. "How is your head?" "The swelling's gone down. Thank you." Bourne sat on the large couch. "I understand you have peace in your heart." "And a desire for 3 million francs. "Then you were satisfied with your call to London?" "Yes. No one could have programmed the ambassador into reacting the way he did. He was very frightened. There is a snake lady, and she creates extraordinary fear in high places. Now, you say that you, and you alone, must reach the Blackbird. May I ask why?" "Because if one drunk old man can talk about the soldier's heart, then others may do so. You can be traced by the police. My clients want no connection with you." "Even through you?" "Later I'll disappear. You won't, though maybe you should think about doing so. Here, I brought you something." Bourne sat forward on the couch and reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a roll of franc notes held together by a rubber band. He threw it over to Santos, who caught it in midair. 200,000 francs in advance. Give me the information I need, and I'll deliver it to London. Whether or not the Blackbird accepts my client's offer, you will still receive the balance of the 3 million. Santos got up from the chair and walked across to a card table. If you will, please, come over here. Bourne rose from the couch and walked over to the card table, suddenly astonished. Spread across the table were his 3 passports, as well as the gun and the knife taken from him last night. "I'll accept your money now," said Santos. "But instead of you flying to London, London will fly to Paris. Tomorrow morning, when he arrives at the Pont Royal, you'll call me. I'll give you my private number, of course. Then we'll have an exchange. The money for the information." "I'll do what I can," said Bourne. 2 hours later, he called Bernardin. "My God, it is 4 o'clock in the morning, so I can assume you have something important to tell this 70-year-old man." "I've got a problem." "You've got too many problems, but never mind. What is it?" "I'm as close as I can be, but I need another man." "What kind of man?" "My contact with the Jackal expects an Englishman to fly over from London this morning with 2,800,000 francs. "Far less money than you have, I assume." "Yes, but I'm being watched, so I can't go to the bank, and I don't have an Englishman to bring what I can't get to the Pont Royal." "I can get the money for you. Sign a paper releasing it to me. Give the paper to the hotel concierge, and I'll pick it up." "Fine. What about the Englishman? This morning?" "Not a problem, old boy," said the Frenchman in a perfect English accent. Soon after 4:30 in the afternoon, Bernardin walked into the Pont Royal, dressed in a dark suit that was obviously British. He went to the elevator, and eventually, after 2 wrong turns, reached Bourne's room. "Here's the money," he said, dropping a small case on the floor. He sat down at the desk, took 2 automatics and 3 grenades from his pockets, and placed them in a row. "I will relax now." "What the hell is that? Are they?" cried Bourne. "When you go out to do your business, you will leave the door open," replied Bernardin. "If somebody comes down that narrow passage, he will see a grenade in my hand." "That makes sense," said Bourne, going to the door. Out on the Montalembert, he walked to the corner, leaned against the wall, and waited. A man walked across the street toward him. It was the talkative messenger from last night, his hand in his jacket pocket. "Where's the money?" "Where's the information?" answered Bourne. "The money first." "That's not the arrangement." Without warning, Bourne grabbed him by the jacket, pulling him forward off his feet. Bourne moved up his free hand and gripped the messenger's throat, his fingers digging into the man's flesh. "You go back to Santos and tell him he's got a one-way ticket to hell. I don't deal this way." "Enough," said the low voice, its owner coming around the corner on Bourne's right. The huge figure of Santos approached. "Let him go, Simon. It's nothing. It is now only you and me." Bourne released the messenger, who looked at Santos. Responding to a gesture of his boss's large head, the man raced away. "Your Englishman arrived," said Santos when they were alone. "He carried a small case. I saw myself. So I shall give you the information. What I am going to tell you, Mr. Simon, is known by only 4 people in the world. However, if you even hint at Argenteuil as your source of information, I'll know it immediately, and you will never leave the Pont Royal alive." "The contact can be made so quickly?" "With the telephone number. But you will not place the call for at least an hour from the moment we part. If you do, again I will know it, and again I tell you, you're a dead man." "An hour. Agreed. Only 3 other people have this number? Why not choose one that you're not particularly fond of so that I can mention him, if it's necessary?" Santos smiled thinly. "Moscow," he said softly. "I up in Zerninsky Square." "The KGB?" "The Blackbird is building a network in Moscow. Always Moscow is fascinated by it." Ilyich Ramirez Sanchez, thought Bourne. Trained at Novgorod. Dismissed by the KGB as a madman. The Jackal. "I'll remember that, if it's needed. The number, please?" Santos said it twice, with the words that Bourne had to say. He spoke slowly, obviously impressed that Bourne wrote nothing down. "Is that all clear?" "Yes," said Bourne. "If everything goes as I hope it will. How do you want me to get you the money?" "Call me. You've got my number. I will leave Argenteuil and come to you, and never return to Argenteuil." "Good luck, Santos. Something tells me you deserve it." "No one more so. Goodbye." Santos walked away, and Bourne, his heart beating fast, headed back to the Pont Royal. "Bernardin," he said, entering his room, "put the weapons away. We've struck gold." "In what way?" "An hour," announced Bourne. 43 minutes from now. Write this down, Francois." Bourne repeated the phone number given to him by Santos. "Can you find out where that number is?" "It might take some time and cost money." "The money doesn't matter, and I'll pay more for less time." Bernardin picked up the phone. Former Judge Bernard Prefontaine watched Randolph Gates cry as the professor sat forward on the couch in Boston's Ritz-Carlton Hotel, his face in his hands. "So you got into trouble in France, Randy?" "My God, how did you find out?" You know I can't possibly tell you that, but these things leave a trace." The trace in this case was a file held by Army intelligence. Conklin had found a reference to it in Swain's diary and asked Cassett to investigate. "You don't know what it was like," said Gates. "I was setting up a business deal when I was kidnapped. Then I was thrown into a plane and flown to Marseille, where the most horrible things happened to me. I was kept in a room, and every few hours I was given drugs. For more than 6 weeks. Women were brought in, movies made. I wasn't myself." "So you became the Jackal's man in the world of high finance." "It's how he found me. The deal I was trying to do was opposed by some people in the Far East. They hired him. Oh, my God, he'll kill me." "Yes, he probably will. Sorry about that, Randy." "What am I going to do?" "There's a way. First, a long rest at a private health center. But even before that, your complete cooperation right now. If you help, the Jackal will be killed, and you'll be free, Randy." "I'll do anything." "How do you reach him?" "I have a telephone number." Gates took his wallet from his pocket and dug into it with trembling fingers. "Only 4 people alive have it." The hour was over, and Bourne left the hotel, walking slowly, crossing 4 streets until he saw a public phone by the River Seine. It was dark now, and the boats on the river were dotted with lights. He breathed steadily, controlling himself as he went inside, put in a coin, and dialed. "Yes?" It was a woman's voice. "Blackbirds circle in the sky," said Bourne, repeating Santos's words in French. "They make a great deal of noise, but one is silent." A man's voice came on the line. "Who is this?" "The Jackal." It was the Jackal. The smooth, fast French could not hide the Latin American accent. "Somebody who was trusted by somebody who knows you with this number. I can offer you the contract of your career, of your life. You can name your price. But those who pay are among the most powerful men in the United States." "This is a very strange call, very unusual." "All I need is your interest at this point. If the answer is yes, I can reveal more. If it's no, well, I tried, but I am forced to go elsewhere. The newspapers say he was in Brussels only yesterday. I'll find him." There was a sharp intake of breath at the mention of Brussels and the unspoken name of Jason Bourne. "Yes or no, Blackbird?" Silence. Finally, the Jackal spoke. "Call me back in 2 hours," he ordered, hanging up the phone. It was done. Bourne leaned against the payphone, the sweat pouring down his face and breaking out on his neck. The Pont Royal. He had to get back to Bernardin. "It was Carlos," he announced, closing the door and crossing to the bedside phone while taking Santos's card out of his pocket. He dialed. Seconds later, he spoke. "The bird's confirmed," he said. "Give me a name, any name." The pause was brief. "The case will be left with the concierge. Send one of your men. If he uses that name, the concierge will give it to him. Count the money and send my passports back to me." Bourne hung up and turned to Bernardin. "We have an address on the Boulevard Lafave for that phone," the Frenchman said, and told Bourne the number. "I'm leaving," said Jason Bourne, taking Bernardin's automatic off the desk and putting 2 grenades in his pocket. "Do you mind?" "Take them," replied the Frenchman, pulling another gun from his belt. "But why?" "I've got at least a couple of hours, and I want to look around." "Alone?" "How else? If we call for support, I risk being gunned down or spending the rest of my life in jail for an assassination I was not involved with in Belgium." Bernardin stared at the ringing telephone, wondering whether to pick it up. He had to. "Yes?" "Jason, it's you, isn't it? Maybe I have the wrong room." "Alex, this is you." "Francois, what are you doing there? Where's Jason?" "Things have happened so fast. I know he's been trying to reach you." "It's been a difficult day. We've got Panov back." "That's good news." "I've got other news. A telephone number where the Jackal can be reached." "We've got it. And an address. Our man left an hour ago." "For God's sake, how did you get it?" "A complex process that I believe only your man could have handled. He's very imaginative." "Let's compare," said Conklin. "What's yours?" Bernardin said the number he had written down on Bourne's instructions. The silence on the phone was a silent scream. "They're different," said Conklin finally. "They're different!" "A trap," said Bernardin. God, it's a trap! Chapter 10. The Maurice. Twice Bourne had passed the dark, quiet row of old stone houses on the Boulevard Lafave. He then returned to the Rue de l'Essier and found a sidewalk café. He ordered coffee. As the waiter returned to the service bar, Bourne pulled out his small notebook and pen, shutting his eyes for a moment, then opening them and drawing everything he could remember. There were 3 pairs of attached houses, separated by narrow alleys. Each double complex was 3 floors high, each front entrance reached by climbing a steep flight of brick steps. At either end of the row were vacant lots. The address of the Jackals telephone number was the final structure on the right, though maybe he occupied the whole row. Bourne left the café and walked slowly, as an older man might walk, toward the Boulevard Lafave. The closer he came to the last corner, the more he became aware of the rising and falling sounds from different directions. Police cars. What had happened? Bourne ran to the edge of the building in front of the Lafave. What were they doing? 5 police cars arrived from different directions, each stopping in front of the building on the right. Then a large police van appeared, its searchlight shooting out as a group of black uniformed men with automatic weapons leaped out into the street and crouched behind the police cars. Fools! To give Carlos a warning was to lose the Jackal. Killing was his profession, and escape was part of it. For God's sake, who had done this? On police authority, all residents will leave the building. The orders came over a loudspeaker and echoed down the street. You have 1 minute before we break into the house. The door above the flight of brick steps on the right opened, and a nun dressed in black appeared. How dare you? She roared. This is the evening prayer time, and you disturb us? You should be asking forgiveness for your sins, not interrupting those who beg God to forgive theirs. Nicely said, sister, said the voice over the loudspeaker. But we have other information, and we insist on searching your house. He knew that voice. It was Bernardin. What had happened? Was Bernardin his enemy, after all? Was it all an act? The black uniformed group raced to the base of the brick steps. An official in plain clothes, the obvious leader of the assault, joined his unit on the sidewalk below the steps. Then he and his men raced up the brick stairs through the door held open by the angry nun. Bourne held his place at the edge of the building, his eyes on the strange scene on Lafave. 12 minutes passed. Then the assault team left, several members bowing and kissing the hand of the real or pretending nun. "Bernardin!" screamed the official, approaching the first police car. "You are finished! Out! Never are you to talk to anybody in the deuxième again. If I had my way, you'd be shot. Nuns! Get out of my car before I shoot you by accident." Bernardin got out of the police car, his old, unsteady legs barely able to maintain balance. The police cars and the van raced away. Bourne had to wait, his eyes moving from Bernardin to the front entrance of the Jackal's house. And it was the Jackal's house. The nun proved it. Carlos could never let go of his lost faith. He often used it as cover, but it was much more than that. Much more. Bernardin walked into the shadows of a storefront across from the house of the nuns. Bourne reached the corner and ran down the sidewalk. "For God's sake, what happened?" he cried. "It's a trap, my friend," said Bernardin. "What?" "Alex and I confirmed it. The telephone numbers were different. I gather that you didn't make your call to Carlos. No, I had the address and I wanted him to wait. What's the difference? This is the house. No, this is where your Mr. Simon was supposed to go, and if he was truly Mr. Simon, he would be taken to another place. But if he was not Mr. Simon, but somebody else, then he would be shot. Bang! Another dead body in search of the Jackal. You're wrong, insisted Bourne. Carlos isn't going to allow anybody to kill me except himself. Those are his orders. He hid, watched, and waited. At 5:17, 2 bicycles, ridden by nuns, stopped in front of the house. The door opened, and 3 more nuns, each carrying a bicycle, walked out and down the brick steps to join them. They started up the street, Carlos's nun behind the others. Bourne moved out from the storefront and ran after them. At an intersection of the Rue Kolb in Montparnasse, a number of trucks prevented Carlos's nun from keeping up with the others. She waved them on and turned into a narrow side street, suddenly moving faster than before. Bourne did not have to increase his speed. A sign on the building fronting the street said "Dead End." There was no other way out. He found the bicycle chained to a street lamp and waited in the darkness of a doorway. He leaned against the stone, breathing heavily, feeling the tiredness in his legs. Only a few short years ago, there would have been none. The sound of a handle turning broke the stillness of the street, followed by the noise of a heavy door being opened. It was the entrance to the apartment in front of the chained bicycle. Bourne watched the woman rush to the lamppost. He walked forward. "You'll be late for prayers," he said. The woman spun around. Bourne gripped her arm with his left hand and tore off her large white hat with his right. The sight of the face in front of him came as a shock. "My God," he whispered. "I know you. Paris, years ago. Your name is Lavier, Jacqueline Lavier. You had one of those dress shops, Les Classiques, a contact point for Carlos in the Faubourg. I thought you were dead." The woman's sharp, middle-aged face twisted in anger. She tried to break out of his grip, but Bourne crashed her against the wall. "You're wrong," said the woman, her green eyes wide. "It's true. I am Lavier, but I'm not the woman you knew. You knew my sister, Jacqueline. I am Dominique Lavier. We were close in age and looked very like each other, Jason Bourne." "You know who I am?" "All Paris, the Jackals Paris knows who you are. Not by sight, but they know you are here and they know you're tracking Carlos." "And you're part of that Paris." "I am. Good God, lady, he killed your sister." "She knew the rules. She betrayed him. And at my age, my choices are limited. I took Jackie's place at Les Classiques." "Just like that?" "It wasn't difficult. Jackie supposedly went to Switzerland for some work on her face, and I returned to Paris after 8 weeks of preparation." "And went into the killing game." "I was gradually led into it. In the beginning I was told that Jacqueline had died in a boating accident, and that I would be well paid to carry on in her place. By the time I found out the truth, well, he was paying me well, and I was afraid of him." "It's an old story," said Bourne. "This is now, 13 years later. What happens now?" "I don't know. My choices are zero, aren't they? One or the other of you will kill me, I suppose? Maybe not. Help me take him, and you're free of both of us. You can go to the Mediterranean and live in peace and comfort. Carlos can't reach you because he'll be dead. And is this comfort come from you? Yes. I see. Is that what you offered Santos? A comfortable disappearance? Bourne looked at his prisoner. So it was Santos after all, he said softly. Lafave was a trap. God, the Jackal's smart. Santos is dead. The soldier's heart is closed down. What? Stunned, Bourne stared again at the Lavier woman. That was his reward for trapping me? No. For betraying Carlos. I don't understand. Carlos's eyes and ears are everywhere. Santos was observed sending several heavy boxes out with his main food supplier. A man was sent to the supplier and opened the boxes. Books, interrupted Bourne quietly. And he will kill me too. He will know I have spoken to you. She looked around. He has eyes everywhere. I am not important to him. I can tell the authorities nothing of substance, because I have never seen him. But he will still kill me. I see. Bourne stepped back from his prisoner. I can get you out, he said quietly. Out of Paris, out of Europe, beyond Carlos's reach. Do you want that? As eagerly as Santos did, answered Lavier. I will willingly trade my loyalty from him to you. Why? Because he is old and grey-faced, and is not as good as you. You offer me life. He offers death. That's a reasonable decision, then, said Bourne. Do you have any money? With you, I mean? I have several hundred francs. Why? It's not enough, continued Bourne, reaching into his pocket and taking out a roll of franc notes. Here's 3,000, he said, handing her the money. Buy some clothes somewhere. I'm sure you know how. And take a room at the Maurice Hotel on the Rue de Tivoli. What name should I use? What suits you? How about Brielle, a lovely town beside the sea? Why not? Give me 10 minutes to get out of here, and then leave. I'll see you at the Maurice at noon. With all my heart, Jason Bourne. Let's forget the name. Bourne walked out of the dead-end street and went to the nearest taxi station. Within minutes, a happy taxi driver accepted 100 francs to wait in place at the end of the line, his passenger sitting low in the back seat, waiting to hear the words. "The nun comes out, sir," cried the driver. "She enters the first taxi." "Follow it," said Bourne, sitting up. On the Avenue Victor Hugo, Lavier's taxi slowed down and stopped in front of a public phone. "Stop here," ordered Bourne, climbing out the moment the driver swung into the side of the street. Bourne walked quickly, silently to the telephone behind the nun. He could hear her clearly as he stood 3 meters away. "The Maurice," she shouted into the phone. "The name is Brielle. He'll be there at noon." Yes, I'll stop at my apartment, change clothes, and be there in an hour." Lavier hung up and turned, shocked by the sight of Bourne. "No!" she screamed. "Yes, I'm afraid," said Bourne. "He's old and grey-faced. Those were your words, Dominique. Quite descriptive for somebody who never met Carlos." A little later, an angry Bernardin walked out of the Hotel Pont Royal and approached the taxi. "This is mad," he said. "Get in," said Bourne, on the far side of the woman dressed as a nun. Bernardin did so, staring at her. "Meet one of the Jackal's more talented performers." The taxi made a U-turn and entered the Rue de Bac. "We're going to the Maurice," added Bourne. "I'm sure there's a reason," stated Bernardin. "It's the Jackal's final trap for me," answered Bourne. "Thanks to the persuasive lady here. He expects me to be there, and I'll be there." "I'll call in the deuxième. I still have some friends there." "No," said Bourne. "I can't take the chance. One man could send out an alarm." "Let me help," said Dominique Clavier. "I can help." "I listened to your help before, lady, and it was leading me to my own death. No thanks." "That was before, not now. This old man mentions that he'll call in the deuxième. The deuxième, Mr. Bourne. Even if I survived, I'd no doubt be sent to some horrible prison halfway across the world. Oh, I've heard stories of the deuxième. Besides," continued Clavier, looking at Bourne, "without me in different clothing at the Maurice, Carlos won't come near it." "She's right," said Bourne, leaning forward and looking past Clavier at Bernardin. "I think we can trust her now. She's got an apartment on the Montagne. She can change clothes there." After a short period of silence, Bernardin spoke. "What's your address on the Avenue Montaigne?" Marie sat at the table in her small suite at the Maurice Hotel, reading the newspapers. But concentration was out of the question. Her anxiety had kept her awake after she returned to the hotel soon after midnight, having visited 5 cafes she and David had used so many years ago in Paris. Finally, after 4 in the morning, exhaustion had allowed her to sleep. Now she knew she had to go out again, to keep looking for David. She put down her coffee cup, picked up her coat, and left the room. The ride down to the ground floor seemed to last forever because of an American couple who kept complaining that not enough people in Paris spoke English. Finally, the elevator doors opened, and Marie walked rapidly out into the crowded Maurice hallway. As she crossed the floor toward the entrance, she suddenly stopped as an elderly man in a dark suit sat straight up in a heavy leather chair on her right. He stared at her, his eyes wide open in shock. "Marie Saint-Jacques," he whispered. "My God, get out of here!" "I beg your... what?" The old Frenchman, quickly, with difficulty, rose to his feet. "You cannot be seen here, Mrs. Webb," he said, his voice in a whisper. "Don't look at me. Look at your watch. Keep your head down." The retired deuxième officer glanced away, his lips barely moving. "Go out of the door on the far left. Hurry." "No," replied Marie. "You know me, but I don't know you. Who are you?" "A friend of your husband." "My God, is he here?" "The question is, why are you here?" "I stayed at this hotel once before. I thought he might remember it." "He did, but in the wrong way, I'm afraid. Now leave." "I won't. I have to find him. Where is he?" "You will leave, or you may find only his dead body. You cannot do this to him. You'll kill him. Get out of here, now!" Her eyes half blinded with anger and with tears, Marie started toward the left side of the door. What could she do? What should she do? David was somewhere in the hotel. "Help me. For God's sake, Jason, tell me what to do. Jason." "Yes, Jason, help me. Out in the street, she stood frozen as taxis and limousines broke off from the traffic and pulled up beside the Maurice. A large black limousine with a small religious badge on its passenger door moved to a stop. Both doors beside the sidewalk were opened by the doorman as 5 priests got out, 1 from the front seat, 4 from the large back section. The last 4 priests immediately moved through the crowds to stand 2 at the front of the vehicle, 2 at the back. Suddenly, Marie saw a figure crossing the Rue de Rivoli. It was a tall man in dark clothes, and he was limping, avoiding the traffic. But the limp was false. The legs straightened, if only for a moment. It was David. Another, no more than 2 meters from her, also saw what she saw. A small radio was immediately brought to the man's lips. "David!" Marie screamed. Gunshots filled the Rue de Rivoli. The crowds panicked, many running into the hotel, many more racing away. The old Frenchman who had recognized her came crashing out of the front entrance, firing into the black limousine. "My friend!" roared Bernardin. "Here!" shouted Bourne. "Where is she?" "To your right, next to—" A single gunshot exploded from the glass double doors of the Maurice. Bernardin fell to the sidewalk. A second gunshot ended his life. Marie could not move. Crying, out of control, she fell to her knees, then onto the street. "We're getting out of here. Can you understand that?" said Jason Bourne, his voice not the voice of David Webb. "Yes, yes." Marie awkwardly got to her feet, held by the husband she either knew or did not know. "Let's go. Bernardin gave us our exit. Run with me. Hold my hand."